Hello and welcome to South Bay Sports Radio. Here's your host, Nick Ingram.
And we are back with another episode of South Bay Sports Radio. Today's guest is a South Bay baseball coach who turned his love for the game into a local development academy, helping young players grow in an era where the finish line too often outweighs the journey. Please welcome Andre Van Gerwen to South Bay Sports Radio.
Hey, Nick, how you doing? Thank you for having me on today. I'm excited to do this.
Of course, Coach. Thank you. All right, let's begin. Take us through your journey in baseball. Growing up in Hawthorne, playing at El Segundo High School, when did you truly fall in love with the game, and when did you know baseball was going to be a big part of your life?
The love of baseball came when I was very young from my grandfather. My dad's father was the district administrator for District 25 Little League. So I was always around the game as a kid, and he instilled that love into me. And then as I got into El Segundo, I played my freshman year, and then due to some other circumstances and stuff, I didn't play past my sophomore year. I had a few options to play collegiately until a very, very, very bad break in my elbow kind of derailed that. Then I kind of just hung it up, played recreationally for a few years. I played in a couple of highly competitive adult leagues in my early 20s and into my late 20s. And then, there was a time in there for a good 10-year stretch from like 20 to 30 that if you would have asked me that I'd be doing this full time, into my 40s, I would have looked at you like you're crazy. So I wouldn't really say that there was a definitive time that I knew I was going to be able to do this as much as I enjoyed doing it. It just kind of happened to fall into my lap with an opportunity, and then I just never looked back.
What was the moment or gap in South Bay baseball that led you to create ODA, and what problem were you trying to solve for local players if there was a problem?
I wouldn't say there was a specific moment. I just say I think it was more of a specific thought that popped into my head one day while I was coaching, and it was I was trying to create a platform that allowed families and players to have a little wiggle room in their commitment, in a sense, to where if certain things didn't align to your schedule, I'd have other options for you to come to another night or whatnot. But basically, the initial idea of on-demand athletics was to provide a platform for families to be able to use it at their will, essentially, kind of like a gym membership in a sense. And then my conduit, my mission statement, is I use baseball as my form of training, essentially. So that was a problem that I was looking to solve in my mind.
I love that. And we've had that discussion before because both of my kids are in your academy.
They are.
When you evaluate a young player for the first time, what tells you this kid can play before we even start to look at stats?
That's a great question. It depends on the age and the player in which you're evaluating, right? You're going to evaluate a 10-year-old different from a 12-year-old, a 12-year-old different from a 14-year-old, 14 from a 16, and so forth. If you catch my drift, I would say when you're starting at the bottom of that totem pole that I just mentioned, as far as ages, when you're looking at young players, you want to develop a foundation first, right? So when I'm evaluating a player, whether or not he could play the game or not, I'm not necessarily looking at his skill set and fundamentals. I'm looking at his mindset and demeanor. Is he focused? Does he want to win? Does he want to try to get better? Is he out here to try to goof around because he's having fun with his friends? Those are tells that you could really see at a young age on how well a player is going to develop based on their mentality. But then as you get into the older years and the physicality starts to catch up from player to player, it's that mindset that really kind of is going to set them apart. And then it's once you're looking at recruiting, a player from high school to collegiate level, it's do they have the talent, do they have the tools, and do they have the mindset essentially? And those are the three things you look for.
What are some of the biggest technical flaws you see in hitters and pitchers coming out of youth and travel ball today?
For hitters, I would say it's batting practice approach. And it's young kids that are still developing physically, right? They're going to do certain physical mannerisms that are going to be different because their body is growing essentially, right? The one thing that young hitters can do without a coach having to tell you what you're doing mechanically is your approach. Where are you trying to hit the ball in batting practice? Batting practice is a very controlled environment, Nick. It's a very controlled environment. You have tees where the ball is stationary. You have front flip where you're trying to put the ball in a certain spot so a player can work on that location. You have a coach throwing batting practice who's throwing nothing but cookies. So it's a controlled environment. So you have to have a controlled approach. And I always tell young hitters when you're taking your batting practice, nobody cares if you could hit it through the net or not. I want to see, can you play pepper with your opposite field middle infielder, right? Because when the game comes on, if I'm a righty and in batting practice, I'm just trying to hit good, strong, hard ground balls, line drives, or strong shots to my opposite field gap. If I work that consistently in batting practice, now when I'm in a game and the pitcher's now either overpowering me with the fastball or he's throwing slower than what I'm used to, or he's throwing me curveballs, changeups, you have the crowd, you have the pressure, you have a defense now trying to get you out. You have an umpire who's a human who's going to call some pitches strikes that were balls, some pitches balls that were strikes, and so forth. But if you have that good, strong fundamental approach in batting practice, you're now prepared for all of those. So it doesn't matter if you're on your front side or your head's drifting this and that. If you're still trying to put the ball to that portion of the field, then mechanically you stay in line to compete in games. And I see that as being one of the biggest flaws in hitters is young hitters are trying to go out there and they're looking for the Instagram highlight, that ball to the gap or that home run that they can then put forth on social media or mom and dad can share and this and that. And that's just not how the game is supposed to be played mentally. And then taking one step farther, another big flaw that I see out of club ball with the young hitters is the bat regulations. The bats, the USSSA bats that a lot of the younger players swing at the 10U, 11U, 12U, even 13U level, those bats are so juiced that they're giving hitters a false sense of success when in actuality it's the bat that's doing the majority of the work for them. So then when they get to, their 14U year where they have to switch the bigger field and the heavier bats and then into their high school careers, the players that were mechanically sound with their approach are going to make that adjustment a lot easier than those that have just been living off of being physically bigger and having these juice bats that they could hit the ball an extra 50, 60 feet. And as far as pitching, a lot of young pitchers are afraid of failure. They're afraid to fail to where they're afraid of giving up the hits or the home runs instead of just going after hitters. You get a lot of players that think that they have to nibble at the corners or they have to try to take advantage of the umpire's wide outside corner to try to get hitters out, when in actuality, it's throwing strikes to get hitters out. It's being able to command the strike zone. You're gonna every now and then you're gonna run into a player that has overmatching stuff to where they're gonna just overpower hitters based on their stuff. But more times than not, you're gonna find pitches that are hittable, right? And if you're a hittable pitcher, the way you're gonna get people out is you have to throw a strike, they have to put the ball in play, and your defense has to make a play behind you. That's kind of tough at the younger ages because the defenses are going to be sporadic. Every now and then you might have a shortstop that can make the routine play. You might have a third baseman that can, or a center fielder or whatnot. But those are things that happen at the young level to where a pitcher gets a strike, gets a ground ball to the shortstop, the player makes an error, and that player reaches base. They don't see the success story on what they did. They see the negatives of the player reaching base. So that leads to pitchers not just commanding the strike zone. And then they get to the high school level and they just cannot confidently throw a strike when a strike needs to be confidently thrown.
I can definitely see all of that in
Mhm.
those two young children that I have. And it's definitely something that, you're excited for the process moving forward, knowing that
Right.
it's a process. It's not, it's a marathon. It's not a speed. It's not a sprint. You're looking
Mhm.
to get better this much at a time. We're not
Yeah.
going to make this improvement today.
Right. It's baby steps. It's the baby step syndrome. Like you said, you want to get 1 inch better every single day. And that should be the
Like,
definite goal.
drawing off of that, how do you teach mental toughness and confidence in a sport where even the best players fail 70% of the time?
I don't believe that's something that's taught. I think that's something that's learned in a sense. I think that if you go to try to teach it, it's probably not going to resonate until they have to live it, essentially, when it comes down to the mental toughness and the confidence, right? You could sit here and tell a kid to be confident until you're blue in the face, but that confidence isn't going to grow until they have an opportunity to win the game with a base hit. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
That's going to help feed that confidence. And then as far as the mental toughness, is kind of the same thing. In order to develop mental toughness, you have to live through adversity. So you can't really force adverse problems. Those have to happen naturally. And then how the player is going to respond to those adverse effects, they're either going to grow or sink from, if that makes any sense. They're either going to grow from it, learn from it, become better, or it's going to be something that's going to crush them and snowball. So it's just something you can't really teach. Now, can you help players along the way? Absolutely. Can you provide structure and guidelines and suggestions? Absolutely. But the true growth in it is only going to come through experience. And that's just my personal opinion on it.
We're going to jump to a recruiting question. What should
Oh,
South Bay families understand about the recruiting process that most people get completely wrong?
recruiting from as in like the collegiate process?
Correct.
Correct. I think sometimes I think sometimes a lot of young players get too comfortable in a sense, right? So recruiting and playing collegiately, when you look at the mathematics and the percentages, it's not something that mathematically is plausible. Does that make sense? If I'm a betting man, right? I like to bet on football. I like to bet on a lot of stuff. If you put a 12-year-old in front of me, right, without me ever seeing them play baseball, and they tell me you either have to bet that they're going to play collegiate baseball or bet that they're not going to play collegiate baseball, I would put my money on not every single time, just because that's the way the numbers work, right? So
Right.
then how do you get to the next level through that recruitment process, knowing that the math is in your favor? So now it's okay. Do you have the physical tools that most of the institutions are going to look for? Do you have the height? Do you have the physicality? Do you have the speed? Do you have the strength? So then once you kind of realize that you have those tools and then it's starting to click, now it comes down to networking yourself and making sure that you're putting yourself out there. The bigger schools, if you have talent and you're good, they are going to find you. It's the Division twos, Division threes, NAIAs, the junior colleges that you have to basically network yourself for them to be able to find you. Hi, my name is so and so. I go to this school. This is the position I'd play. I'm very interested in coming to your school. I would love to have more information, blah, blah, blah. But you have to start that line of communication. And then there's other ways you could do it too. If you can financially afford it, you could always outsource that to third party companies, and then they do that networking for you. And that's how a lot of other players can do it and they can get noticed. But it comes down to networking. Do you have the physical tools? And then most importantly, the third point on is, are you diligent in a routine? And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to say you want to play collegiate baseball and have the tools for it, but do you have the mentality to understand how much of a grind collegiate baseball is? To where it's strength and conditioning, it's classes, it's practice, it's games, it's film room, it's study, it's extracurricular weightlifting, extracurricular batting practice. It's a ridiculously stressful schedule, and I think it's a culture shock for a lot of players when they taste that for the first time, and they're like, "Damn, I didn't realize how chaotically stressful this is on my mental space and my physical space." Because at the end of the day, too, when you go to college, there's the experience factor in college that a lot of people forget is important, right? You go to college, you go to a 4-year school, you have that social endeavor that you're going on at the same time, but you're also required for a 60 to 70-hour work week doing something extracurricular. Plus, you have school on top of that. So it comes down to those three things. You have to have the tools, you have to network yourself, and then you have to be diligent on a routine. You have all three of those, you'll play at the collegiate level.
From your time at Maricosta to North Torrance and now at Bishop Montgomery, what have you
Mhm.
seen that separates programs that consistently win and what sets those programs apart?
First one I'm going to say is resources, right? And what I mean by resources, it's baseball is a technical sport. Players need to have specific repetitions on a daily basis if you're going to be competitive daily. And it's, do you have the financial resources to be able to, have the tools necessary? As far as baseballs are expensive. When I was over at North, I'd spend like $6,000 to $7,000 a year on baseballs alone. That's for practices and games. You have pitching machines, you have fungo nets, screens, field maintenance, all this other stuff. So when you have financial resources as well as other resources as far as staff helping you out to be able to facilitate a frosh team, a JV team, a varsity team, and keep everything congruent, That's one of the biggest factors. So if the program has those resources, then it's really easy for a coach to come in with the next point on it, which is going to be mentality and structure. If you have mentality and structure, and that's going to vary from coach to coach, essentially. Every coach is going to have a different mentality, how they do things. Some are going to be stricter, some are going to be looser, and so forth. But it then comes down to having the right structure for the right mentality of the players that are there. So you have resources, structure, and mentality, and those are the two things that separate winning programs from losing programs. And if you look at what Coach Signetti's done over at University of Indiana's football this year, that's a prime example. You have had a program that has been dismal in losing for decades. And now all of a sudden they come in the last 2 years and one of the top dogs in collegiate football. And that came down to Indiana pumped in a lot of money and resources into their football program, for one, with the NIL deals and the transfer portals. And then you had a coach like Signetti, who just seems like he's a psychological savant when it comes to football. You're going to have those types of turnarounds. Now, all of a sudden, Indiana is a powerhouse. They use the portal, they use their financial resources. Signetti came in with structure and psychological resources, completely revamped the mentality of the team, and now look at what they're doing. So that's basically the deciding factors that's between a winning program and a losing program, in my opinion. The most important being resource.
Signetti's out of that Nick Saban coaching tree as well.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. But he has his own natural knack at doing things. When I was watching the Rose Bowl against Alabama, he's up 30 points in the fourth quarter, completely demolishing the team, and he's got this borderline psychotic killer look on his face, like he's going in for the kill shot. It was impressive. It's very entertaining to watch, on the outside watching it, but you could totally tell that he has a very good mental control over his team, and his team is very, very well prepared. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Agreed. It's one of the funner teams that I've been able to watch at the college level in quite some time.
Absolutely.
At the
Right.
youth and high school level, how do you balance teaching fundamentals with newer training tools like video, data, and technology?
Mm. I wouldn't say you have to balance those. I would say it's more in a sense of making sure you're using them together. When I was growing up, I don't think I ever saw myself swing at a baseball until I was 23 or 24 years old. There was just no video. Back in the day when, if you wanted to record my little league at bat, my dad would be out there with the, camera you have on the side of your head right there. And those, that's just people didn't bring the video cameras to a little league game. So now when you're able to take batting practice as a 10-year-old and I can set my phone up and I can record my entire session, when I have visual data to go back and kind of cement what I was working on and what I wasn't working on, or pick up flaws or this and that and approach. And then you have, like, from the pitching side of it, you have the Rapsodo, you have the TrackMan, you have so many tools that can now give you real life data on what your ball is doing at a hand. There's finding a way to balance the two of understanding old school philosophy and fundamentals and new age technology, bring them together, and then you're unstoppable in a sense. So I'd say it's not necessarily balancing them; it's work using them together.
The South Bay has become a hotbed for baseball with multiple players in Major League Baseball, one in the Hall of Fame, and more on the way. What do you think
Mhm.
makes this area so special for developing talent?
I would say one, climate. Obviously, that's the one thing everybody goes to is climate, right? And you can't make an argument against it. We have beautiful weather, 360 out of 365 days out of the year. It makes playing a sport like baseball that demands good weather doable. So, players are able to play year round. And then you do have a ton of resources out here. Look at the amount of teams and coaching available at fingertips for players to be able to take advantage of. And then you have families with disposable income here in Los Angeles. Yes, it's expensive to live here, but there is money to spend here. So families have those monetary resources to pay for the extra training, to pay for the physical fitness training, the footwork conditioning, the club ball, the private lessons, and so forth. And then genetics too. If you think about it. And I was literally just having this conversation with somebody recently. I couldn't remember who it was, but you have a lot of former professional athletes that when their careers are done, they settle here in Los Angeles and Southern California. This is a hotbed settlement for a lot of retired professional athletes who have made really good financial career. So then you put that factor into it with the lineage that a lot of these players have. I'm not surprised that it is a hotbed for professional athletes.
Agreed. All right,
Mhm.
last one. 10 years from now, what do you want people to say about the impact ODA had on South Bay baseball?
That ODA was able to be a platform that gave every player a shot, regardless of their talent at the time. I think that is something I'm very proud of. And I think that's something looking back, I'm going to continue to be proud of is that no matter what their skill level was, I gave them a shot and I was able to help them get better.
Coming from the background that I have, I know that having seen both of my kids play, and one of them, my older one, asked me a question. He said, "Dad, do you think I'm getting better?" I said, "In all honesty, you haven't had the opportunity to play full seasons and show people what you can do." And I think that this summer, having worked with ODA, having worked with Andre continuously, it's been something that you've grown. And I've watched you play forever. I've watched you grow forever. I raised him as a left-handed hitter, thinking that
Mhm.
that was his natural way. And then somebody flipped him around. And I always had that in my head where I was, I taught myself how to switch hit,
Mhm.
and somebody kind of like, no, let's have him hit right. He looks more comfortable right. So if he ever comes to you and says, "Coach, I remember hitting left," it like, well, your dad said something about it, but
Yeah.
he's got a pretty good swing as a lefty, as a righty. And then there's the baby, and he's got the talent, but it's not always about talent. You gotta control the controllables, and you are that controllable. It's there's only so many things that you have control of, and your emotions and your attitude are two of them.
Absolutely, and that's a hard one too for young kids is the controllables is because they're still developing, they're still kids, and it's you know it, sometimes it feels like today, Nick, that we put so much pressure and extracurriculars on our kids sometimes that we don't allow them to be kids. And I'm guilty of that as a father. The regimen I have my 5-year on right now is not necessarily the best regimen for being a kid. We have rules and structure and discipline. He's homeschooled, so there's certain things that he has to hit before he gets to do his extracurriculars. But it's tough. It's hard to do something that's supposed to be fun like baseball and always have that professional focus when you're as young as some of these kids are. So you have to be able to allow the kids to make sure that they are still having fun and getting better. And I think that's something I do very well as a coach.
I do
Mm.
have one more question that I just thought of. So just kidding. This is the final one. In a world where instant gratification has become the norm and YouTube shows the finish line and not the start, is there a message that you give any of these kids that, want to hit it over the fence, that are more interested in launch angle, having seen that in these broadcasts? Or are you teaching the Freddie Freeman way, where it's, like you said earlier, hitting it to the opposite field, trying to hit it down the opposite line, for a righty down the first base line, for a lefty down the left field line?
Right. Instant gratification is probably the worst thing for young baseball players these days, especially when it comes down to you don't see people ever posting their failures. You don't see, oh, I went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Here's my 4 at bats. No, you're going to see the I went 4 for 4 today with 3 doubles and a home run. Here are my doubles. Here's my home run. You see what I'm saying? So my first thing would be to challenge players. So almost every single time in a game these days, there's a parent filming an at bat for their player, for their son or daughter, right? I would say at the end of your game, when you're going to go back through those videos, look at your failures first. Look at your strikeout videos. Look at if your mom or dad happen to catch you making an error on a ground ball, look at that video before you look at your success videos. Therefore, you can then kind of get an idea of like, okay, yeah, you know what? Remind yourself that failure is okay. Failure is okay, and competitive nature is what's most important. Then go back around and look at your success stories in there, and then kind of give yourself that dopamine rush, but remind yourself of the failures. And then I challenge some of these big time social media influencers that have tons of followers that are posting things. Let's see some of your failures. Did you make an error that you happen to caught on video? Let me see what that looked like. Let me see how you bounce back from that. Did you strike out 3 times today? Let me see those strikeouts. How did you handle yourself after the at bat? This and that. I think that'd be something good for young hitters and young young baseball players or young athletes in general to be able to see more of the failure and how they were able to then bounce back from that, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of
Hopefully.
sense, and that's actually just what I wanted to hear. All right, that's going to wrap the quote unquote serious part of this episode. We're going to transfer into rapid fire. Andre Van Gerwen,
Right.
baseball, top 3 all-time favorite baseball players.
Number 1, Roberto Clemente. Have a hard time going against that. Number 2, Derek Jeter, just because all the years that he was there, he was always my favorite player of my generation. And then of today's modern day player, I would say right now it's probably Trey Turner on the Phillies. It's just his stint with the Dodgers. He just does everything so graceful. I just think he's a good all around baseball player.
Your least favorite MLB franchise?
Least favorite MLB franchise. That's a hard one because I always love the Expos and the fact that they're the Nationals right now. I think that's the one that I'm going to go with right there, just because I was kind of heartbroken when the Expos left Montreal. I felt like it was a place that baseball should have stayed. And then when they became the Nationals, as great as it was for Washington, D.C., I would probably say that. But it's me forcing an answer because I don't think I have a least favorite MLB franchise.
I'm going to send you the documentary on Netflix that a friend of mine had sent me about the Expos that you got to check out. And I know why the Expos had to leave, but I'll tell you more about that when I come to pick up the kids tonight or tomorrow. All right.
Great.
A biopic is being made about Andre Van Gerwen. Who plays you?
Probably George Clooney. People used to say I look like George Clooney back in the day, or that George Clooney looked like me, whatever you want to say. So I'd probably say Clooney. Plus, I don't think I've ever seen a movie that George Clooney was in that wasn't good. So I'll take Clooney.
All right, there we go. And last but not least, your go-to South Bay eatery and your favorite dish there.
Zacatecas Mexican food in Hawthorne is my go-to spot. And the dish that I get there is called Costa Azul, and it's bacon wrapped shrimp stuffed with cheese, and then you get a tortilla, put together your own taco. It's one of the best dishes I think I've ever had.
Beautiful. Coach, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for your time. I love what you're doing and excited to see what's next.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick, for having me on. This